Hi everyone. I'm going to briefly, or as briefly as I can, introduce you to MLA. Now, you're not going to get everything you need from this presentation, and I'm going to actually just go through some of the examples very quickly, or just point them out to you in terms of variations. Why? Because you will never learn from a lecture how to format every possible kind of document. You do that by using resources like Purdue's Online Writing Lab, which is the resource that I'm going to be using to present to you. Which has a number of lists of kinds of documents that you might want to use, or the Delta College uh, resource on this. Both of these are linked to in our course site. If you have used the Delta College databases, as I've suggested you do, then use Delta's handout on citing electronic sources, because it will show you exactly the correct documentation style for each of our databases. So use the resources for MLA that I've shared with you in the course. They're going to be extremely useful, but I want to go over some basic principles with you here. Okay, so MLA is a Modern Language Association. It's an organization of scholars in the humanities, and this is a style manual. And I mentioned style guides in the presentation on visual information. It's a style manual that addresses all sorts of things, including formatting. We're not going to worry about formatting because you're not writing an academic essay here, but also citations, how to incorporate sources into your document. One thing to keep in mind is that many of you will also use the APA format. What you need to be aware of is you're going to learn basic principles using MLA. Those same principles will apply to APA, but the specifics of the format and the documents are going to be different. So what you want to focus on is developing the knack, the skill for looking up the appropriate style and then following it. And so there are all sorts of resources on APA as well. Go to the Online Writing Lab, look at their APA style information, and then you can use that when you need it. You'll understand how citations work. You just have to make sure you're using the right information in the citations for APA. Why do we use any sort of citation at all? And especially, why are we using a consistent style sheet? Two things. First of all, MLA lets readers cross-reference sources very easily, and APA does the same thing. In other words, you'll have in-text citations indicating what information in your document comes from a source, with just enough information to point your reader to the works cited page. And on your works cited page, they'll then see the full citation that will allow them to go out and find that document. It also allows for consistency within the discipline. So if you're using MLA or APA, whichever one you use it consistently, then I know when I see what citation it is or what format you've used, I know how to find things. I know how it's going to work because I'm familiar with the general style sheet. Finally, using these sources and citing your sources accurately enhances your credibility. Okay, if you've used information from another source, forget about plagiarism, which is a big problem. And if you're caught plagiarizing even accidentally, it really diminishes your credibility. But making sure that the ideas you're getting from experts are clearly identified gives those ideas greater weight, as long as they've been tied into your analysis in a way that makes sense. And plagiarism, I mentioned this already, and I skipped ahead a little bit. You really have to be careful about plagiarism, even if you don't intend to plagiarize. And I encourage you, and I'm going to share one more brief presentation with you on making sure you're safe, and I'll talk a little bit about when to quote, when to paraphrase, when to summarize. When you're summarizing and paraphrasing, which is usually the best way of using information, for example, if you're taking a number from a source, you don't have to quote the entire sentence in which that number appears. You work that number into your paragraph. Okay? You still need to cite that source. If you've not cited that source there in the paragraph, you're plagiarizing. And then that's a case where you've probably plagiarized accidentally, but it still undermines your credibility. It'll affect the grade of your tech report. And out in the real world, that number won't have any credibility because your reader won't know where the heck it comes from, and you look less professional for not having cited it. Okay? So be very conscious of that. Every time you use something from another person's ideas, facts, whatever, if it comes from someone else, you've got to have the in-text citation where you've used it, and then the citation on the works cited page that tells us where to locate that information ourselves. MLA regulates document format. These all do that. Not for us, it won't, because we're writing a technical report. in-text citations and the works cited, and these are the two that we're worried about for our purposes here. And there are a few changes to the MLA in the most recent edition, so just be aware of these. We don't underline anymore, we only italicize. Okay, we now include the publication medium because that's changed so much. So if it's a print source, we say print. If it's a web source, we say web. And now there are a few more new abbreviations, such as NP for no publisher given. These are partially to deal with online sources, which don't always have all the information. They don't have the consistency. When someone used to publish a book, they would include all the information needed for the citation because they knew that would be needed for these sorts of things. Same with journal articles, magazine articles. There was a consistency in the kinds of information these provided. On the web, you don't have that kind of consistency. So now MLAs had to become more flexible to accommodate different kinds of sources. Within the text, we use parenthetical citations, and these are called parenthetical citations because they're in parentheses. Parentheses indicate something that you don't have to read. In other words, if you leave it out, it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. So this is information your reader it needs to be there to indicate that you've got a source, but the reader can skip it as he or she is actually reading. Okay, the format's going to vary depending on the medium. Again, you want to be able to look these up in a resource. I'll hit a few highlights here. Okay, and the parenthetical citation also will depend on what's in the sources entering the works cited page. Okay, the first thing in the corresponding works cited entry is going to be the signal word in the text of that parenthetical citation. In other words, a thing that tells readers where to look on that works cited entry, because the works cited page is arranged alphabetically. So if you've got that first word in your parenthetical citation, then I'm going to be able to find whatever it is on the works cited page. So here are examples of what this looks like. The first example, you've got the author Wordsworth mentioned in the line. So what do you have in the parenthetical citation? Well, what do you need? If you've got an author's name and you've got a page number, that's what you're going to have in your parenthetical citation. The first line, we've mentioned the author's name already, so we've just got the parenthetical citation with the page number. The second line we don't, so we include both, and that's your standard basic parenthetical citation. Okay, and the third, we've done it again. We've left Wordsworth in the sentence like we did in the very first example, and so we only need the page number at the end. Okay, here's what the works cited entry is going to look like, and this explains why we want the author's last name in the parenthetical citation. Why? What's the first thing in the works cited entry? The author's last name. So that's your signal word. So I can find this easily by looking up the author's last name. So if you don't have an author, then you look at what the next word is on that margin. If it's not a, an, or the, you include that in your parenthetical citation. Okay, so here is a print source. It's a book by Kenneth Burke on language as symbolic action. You can tell this was put together by an English teacher. And again, you've got that signal word, Kenneth Burke, Burke being what's going to appear on the margin there. If it's in the sentence, then what do? You just put the page number. Okay, you're seeing the examples below. If it's not in the sentence, you use that and the page number. Okay, if you don't have a known author, it's an article. We've got an article here called Impact of Global Warming. What do? A few words from that title instead, and then the page number. Why? Because if there's no author, what's going to be the first thing on the margin? The title of the article. Okay. Here's what the works cited page will look like for this. And notice it's not the entire article title that's been cited, just the first few phrases, enough to be a little bit meaningful, but you don't want an entire long article title. Because why? Because the goal of that works cited entry is just to get us, the parenthetical citation is just to get us to the proper citation on the works cited page. These are some specific examples, and I'm not going to go over them in detail, but be aware there are variations. How do you deal with this? You go to one of the online citation engines. You go to Purdue's Online Writing Lab. You look up the kind of source you've got, and then you use that. Okay, so here's a case with, for example, authors with the same last name. You've got two authors with the same last name. What do? You use the first initial of one of the first names to indicate which one you're dealing with. Okay, if you've got multiple editions, you're going to indicate that edition typically. Works by multiple authors. How to handle that? Okay, you list the names as they appear on the works cited page, which usually follows a format that the authors will have chosen in the article itself. So when you see the author's name in the article, that's what you follow when you do this. You don't alphabetize them because maybe Smith is the primary author. We don't know. They put their names in this order, so we respect that and follow that. Multiple works by the same author. Okay, how do you deal with that? Well, even though you've got the author's name, you're going to also have to include a little bit from the title of the work. So again, I know which work you're citing from that author. Multi-volume works, citing the Bible, indirect sources. This is important. If you are quoting an interview, for example, that you're reading in a magazine. So let's say you've got Bob Jones is interviewing President Obama. If you quote President Obama, you can't quote him directly because that would mean that you had interviewed him. So what do? You use this QTD, which means quoted in, and then the author of the article. So quoted in Brown, and then the page number. That tells us you're quoting President Obama, but where did you find what he said? You found him in Brown. That's very important. Most of the expert resources that you're going to be using in your report will be things that you found in other sources. In other words, you're not going to be interviewing these experts yourself. The only time you wouldn't do this is if the expert wrote the article. So if you've got an article written by so-and-so, well, then you just cite them directly. But if an expert is being interviewed, then it's going to be quoted in the writer of the article in the works cited in the parenthetical citation to indicate that you didn't interview the person yourself. If you've got more than one citation in a line, if you're paraphrasing, you've drawn from a couple of sources, you just include both with a semicolon in between them. Non-print sources, again, very useful, especially internet sources here. And again, Delta has a handout linked to in our course for dealing with electronic sources. Extremely useful. Okay, things to note about this: a lot of websites won't have all of this information. So this is an article on an online web site that has the author's name, Garcia Elizabeth, the name of the article, the name of the website. The next bit there is the organization put the website out, the date of initial posting, or the date the article was posted, and that last date there is the date when you access it. And we'll look at this briefly when we get to the works cited page itself. If you are quoting in the middle of a line, there's a way to deal with that. You just put the citation before the comma immediately after the quote, or just put it immediately after the quote, and then continue your line. Why is this important? Well, up to that citation is what you've taken out of the author. After that, though others disagree, that's your thinking on the subject. How do you deal with a long quotation? I indented 5 spaces. If it's more than 5 lines, you indented 5 spaces. Just notice at the very end, in the other parenthetical citation examples we've been looking at, the period has come after the parentheses. For a long quotation, the period, or whatever the end punctuation is, question mark, exclamation point, whatever, comes in front of the parentheses. Why? I don't know. But you have to get it right. Okay, so just pay attention to that. You can add words to a quote if need be. So here I'm quoting a passage, but the passage won't make sense without a little more context from the rest of that paragraph. So I add that how in brackets. So you add something in, you put it in brackets, and that tells the reader that that's not part of the original quote. How do you leave something out? You put those 3 dots. They're called ellipses, and that indicates you've left something out. So rather than have a huge long quote, most of which is too detailed or not important to what the point you're trying to make, you leave out what you don't need and you put those 3 dots. Okay, your works cited page. Look at this and look at the model in your text and look at any other model you can find. Your works cited page has to look like this. Okay, and it's a constant source of frustration to me because people do all sorts of weird things with the formatting of the works cited page. The whole thing is double spaced. Okay, so there's no extra space between the title and the first citation. There's no extra space between citations. How do I know when we move from one citation to the next? The first line of each citation is at the margin. And then any other lines after that are indented 5 spaces. And you can actually use the tabs ruler in Word to set it to do that automatically on your works cited page. If you're not sure how to do that, you can look in the Word help file, or you just tab in yourself manually. Okay. The basic format for works cited citations: the name of the author if you've got them, the title of the work. If this is a book, title of the book. If it's a magazine, the title of the work will then be the article title followed by the magazine title, right? But whatever you need to identify the name of that work, where it's published, who published it, and when it was published, and then the medium, how it was published. Okay, so these are book examples that we've got here: author's name, name of the book, place of publication, New York, where it was published, or who published it, sorry, Penguin, when it was published in 1987, and print. Magazine, authors, again, here's the title, which will include here the title of the article and the name of the periodical. And then here, because the magazines tend to come out more frequently than books, obviously, you're going to include the day, the month, and the year. Okay. The other new piece of information you have for magazines, you'll see this for journals too, are the pages. The pages there are not the pages you used, but the pages that the article spans in the magazine. So you quote from page 5, but the article goes from 3 to 11. Pages here will be 3 to 11. Okay. And again, the example of that. Article in scholarly journal format, again, the example. The only difference is the way the publication information is presented varies a little bit. Scholarly journals are published in volumes. Okay, so instead of the date, what do we have? We have the volume 50, the edition or the publication within that volume. In other words, there might be 4 or 5 different journal, the soft like magazines or whatever within each volume. So the edition or the magazine within the volume, and then the year of publication. Again, if you've got a journal article, if you found a journal article in EBSCO or InfoTrack or JSTOR, then you will see this information is provided for you. You just have to get it into the right format. And then the web source. And you see a lot of if availables here. If it's here, you include it. If it's not here, you don't include it. So the editor, author, compiler, whatever, the name of the article, the name of the website, not the URL, the name of the site. So not www.amazon.com, but Amazon. Okay? That's important. I don't want to see the URL. That's gobbledygook. In MLA, we don't do it. In APA, you will. So if you've used APA, that's you've done it before. We don't do it in MLA. Okay? So the name of the website, any other information, version number, if it's applied in there, name of the institution or organization affiliated with the website, if it's a government site, for example, or if it's a publisher site. So if McGraw-Hill has published a site of resources, you've got an article, you've got a name of the blog or the section of the website, that's all there, provided by McGraw-Hill, then you include that. Date of last update, find that on the page, or it's maybe the date that the article was posted. Medium of publication, web. An important thing is the date of access. Okay, why? Because if I see something different in your citation than is on the actual web page, and I notice it's been updated since you last looked at it, well then you're off the hook. If you've misquoted and your date of access follows the publication date, then you've obviously screwed up your quotation somehow. And here's some examples of what that looks like, and you'll find plenty of examples in the text on OWL and online. You can also cite all kinds of sources. Here's the personal interview. Name of the person interviewed, you write personal interview, then the date of the interview. Speech, movies, television shows, YouTube videos. You just need to use the resources provided in your text and in the course. And once you're out in the world again, keep a hold of, maybe bookmark some of the resources I've shared in the course. And I still suggest you keep your book, because this is why one of the things that's a useful reference for. Use those to find the specific type of work you're citing, and then just apply it. And you may make mistakes sometimes, but as long as you get the bulk of it right, then your citations will be serving their purpose. Okay, which means you won't be plagiarizing, which means your information will carry the weight that it should carry.